The modern man believes that thought is power. But Machiavelli observed another law. Power does not belong to the one who thinks, but to the one who uses thought to act. The isolated intellect is a blade without a handle, sharp but impossible to wield. Many men mistake clarity for strength, but lucidity without movement is merely light trapped in a cell. Excessive thought creates hesitation. The man who overanalyzes sees 10 paths and fears making a mistake in all of them. While he calculates the perfect move, the enemy has already advanced with an imperfect but real one. Machiavelli saw this among courtiers. The most intelligent rarely ruled because they were too busy predicting chaos, and chaos does not wait for predictions. Thinking is necessary, but thinking too much is self-sabotage. The strategist's mind must work like a precision weapon. Aim, fire, reload. The man who thinks without rhythm, without cut, loses the respect even of those who admire him. Constant doubt is perceived as weakness, and weakness, in politics or in life, is an invitation to manipulation. The illusion of intellect breeds arrogance. Many believe that seeing others' flaws makes them superior, but seeing is not the same as mastering. Machiavelli said that the wise ruler observes the flaws of others only to conceal his own. The man who uses thought as spectacle becomes predictable, and predictability is the death of power. The intellect, when uncontrolled, turns into noise. It multiplies scenarios, possibilities, doubts. True mastery is not in thinking more, but in thinking less, with surgical precision. The strategist observes, decides, and moves without haste. Each decision is cold because it was distilled in silence, not in anxiety. The error of the man who thinks too much is to confuse complexity with depth. He believes that the more he questions, the wiser he becomes. Machiavelli saw the opposite. Wisdom is the art of reducing chaos into functional clarity. He who needs 1,000 theories to act shows that he has mastered none. A sharp mind must cut, not spin around itself. In practice, thought is only power when it is invisible. The man who speaks of his ideas wastes mystery. The man who acts without revealing his reasoning creates authority. Silence makes intellect lethal because those who observe it do not understand what drives it. Machiavelli saw mystery as the highest form of intelligence. To do much while appearing to do little. The illusion of intellect is comfortable because it allows one to feel superior without taking risks. But power demands exposure, impact, presence. Overthinking is the most elegant form of cowardice. The true strategist does not think to avoid mistakes. He thinks to make the mistake that brings him closer to victory. In the end, Machiavelli did not despise thought, only thought that refuses to bow to will. The mind must serve instinct, not rule it. The warning is old and clear. He who lives in his head dies there. And in the game of power, the dead man is always the one who believes that understanding is the same as governing. Lucidity is a gift that demands a high price. Machiavelli knew that seeing too much does not make a man freer. It only makes him more aware of the chains that surround him. The lucid man never sleeps. He observes, calculates, perceives the game even when he does not wish to play. And the more he sees, the heavier the weight of no longer being able to feign ignorance. To see the world as it is requires coldness, because truth is rarely bearable. The common man protects himself with illusions. The lucid man does not. He sees hidden intentions, status games, manipulations disguised as kindness. This distances him from others, for no one tolerates the one who perceives too much. Lucidity is a form of social isolation. The more one understands human nature, the harder it becomes to belong to it, and the price of that understanding is silence. Machiavelli described this kind of man, observant, restrained, always calculating the reactions of others. He does not speak on impulse because he knows that every word creates a debt of power, but such constant awareness becomes a prison. The lucid man does not surrender, does not relax, does not trust. He lives in a state of alert, and this unending alertness corrodes the soul like invisible rust. The cost of lucidity is solitude, not physical solitude, but mental. To be among people and know that none of them perceive what you see. The lucid man learns to feign distraction so as not to appear threatening. He laughs when he must, agrees when it is convenient, but within, he measures every movement around him. It is the price of seeing too much, losing the right to innocence. Machiavelli understood that power is born from such perception, yet he also knew that it destroys peace. The mind that sees every possibility rarely finds rest. Every glance becomes a calculation, every conversation a strategic reading. Lucidity is a blade that cuts on both sides. It reveals the enemy, but wounds its bearer. The lucid man needs emotional armor. Without it, awareness becomes anguish. To know that the world moves through interest, fear, and vanity is tolerable only to those who have learned not to react. Machiavelli did not preach cynicism, but emotional discipline, the ability to see decay and still maintain an intact posture. The mistake many make is to anesthetize lucidity with distractions, pleasures, relationships, comfortable beliefs. But the lucid man cannot deceive himself for long. Awareness always returns, cold and precise, reminding him that everything is exchange, and all kindness has a cost. To flee from lucidity is a slow form of mental suicide. The only way out is to turn the weight into structure, to use lucidity as a weapon, not as a burden. The man who understands the game must learn to play it with elegance and detachment. Clarity must serve control, not pain. To see the world as it is not a curse. It is a test. Machiavelli would leave the warning. The lucid man who does not harden, breaks. Awareness without discipline becomes despair. True power is to gaze into the abyss and remain standing, without turning away. Because only the one who endures what others deny is ready to command what others follow. Machiavelli observed that the moral man rarely governs. He thinks too much before acting, weighing ethical consequences while the adversary is already moving the pieces. Morality, when guided by the vanity of appearing righteous, becomes weakness. The man who thinks of what is right before what is effective is not virtuous. He is predictable. And in the game of power, predictability is a death sentence. Moral thought is born from the need to be seen as good, but whoever needs to prove his goodness has already lost control over himself. The moralist becomes a slave to public approval, shaping his actions according to others' eyes. Machiavelli saw this clearly. Those who seek to appear pure will always be used by those who understand that purity is a mask, not a virtue. The moral man overthinks because he fears judgment. He hesitates to act, worried about maintaining his image of integrity. Meanwhile, the strategic man moves silently, doing what is necessary, not what is ideal. The difference between them is simple. One seeks reputation, the other seeks result. And power always belongs to the one who accepts the cost of the result. Moral thinking creates guilt where there should be calculation. The man who feels guilty for dominating, for manipulating, for using coldness as a tool, still does not understand human nature. Machiavelli never glorified cruelty, but he taught that efficiency stands above emotion. The leader who tries to please everyone ends up hated by everyone, because he confuses kindness with weakness. The moralist believes that justice is universal. The strategist understands that it is relative to the interest of whoever defines it. Morality, at its core, is merely the aesthetic of the ruling power. What is virtue today will be vice tomorrow. All it takes is for the throne to change hands. To think morally in an amoral world is to fight against the wind, believing the wind has a conscience. Machiavelli saw morality as a tool, not a compass. The virtuous prince is the one who knows how to appear, just but acts according to necessity. The appearance of goodness is useful. The mistake is believing in it. The man bound by inflexible principles becomes a prisoner of circumstance, but the man who masters the appearance of virtue becomes untouchable. Thinking too much about right and wrong prevents a man from acting when time demands action, and whoever loses time loses the throne. The moralist is always the last to understand that the world is moved by force, not intention. While he debates ethics, the pragmatic man has already claimed the space he hesitated to occupy. Moral thinking does not create leaders, it creates martyrs. The man who needs to be good will always be surpassed by the one who needs to be effective. Machiavelli warned, "It is safer to be feared than loved." Morality seeks love, power seeks stability. The first disappears when the wind changes. The second remains because it understands that love is emotion, and emotion is volatile. The lesson is simple and brutal. To think too morally is to forget that morality is just one of power's masks. The man who wishes to survive the game must learn to wear the mask without believing in it. Machiavelli would leave the warning cold and clear. The throne belongs to the one who knows how to appear just while doing what is necessary to remain seated. There are men who think to understand, And there are those who think to avoid feeling. Machiavelli observed this difference with cold precision. Thought can be a tool of dominance or a refuge of cowardice. Many hide within analysis because they fear the confrontation that every action demands. They rationalize what they lack the courage to face. They create theories about the game because they cannot bear to enter it. The man who uses thought as an escape seems wise, but he is only an elegant fugitive. He confuses reflection with movement, ideas with impact, awareness with power. He speaks of strategies but executes none. He analyzes people but avoids real contact. His lucidity is a wall, not a bridge. Machiavelli saw in this kind of man a spectator of power, someone who understands the game but never plays it. Excessive thought is a form of anesthesia. Constant reasoning numbs instinct and weakens action. He who thinks too much loses the ability to react with precision. The mind, saturated with possibilities, begins to doubt even the obvious. Machiavelli knew that power demands timing, and timing demands risk. No reasoning can replace the disciplined impulse to act when the moment arrives. Thought as escape is born from fear of error. Man fears looking foolish, fears failure, fears judgment. So he thinks, and keeps thinking, believing that if he understands everything, he will avoid defeat. But power does not belong to those who avoid falling. It belongs to those who know how to fall without losing control. The strategist uses error as part of construction. The cowardly thinker uses it as an excuse not to act. Machiavelli understood that thought must serve the will, not rise above it. The man who lives in his own mind becomes ruled by it. Every idea turns into a barrier. Every reflection, a delay. Reasoning, when not followed by movement, becomes internal noise. Power vanishes because thought, instead of guiding the body, paralyzes it. Thinking is necessary only until reasoning becomes direction. Beyond that, to think more is to weaken oneself. Action is the proof of clarity. The strategist observes, calculates, and moves. The thinker who refuses to act accumulates theories that change nothing, neither the world nor himself. Machiavelli would say that a mind that produces no effect is merely decoration for the ego. Mental escape is the most dangerous form of cowardice because it disguises itself as intelligence. The man believes he is evolving when, in truth, he is distancing himself from impact. He becomes a powerless observer of his own life, lucid yet harmless. And the world does not respect lucidity without strength. It respects only those who turn thought into dominion. The mind must be an instrument, not a hiding place. Machiavelli would leave the warning. The more you think to avoid chaos, the closer chaos comes. The only way to control it is to act within it. The man who uses thought as a shield dies without realizing that the battle never required perfection, only presence. Wisdom is admired, but coldness is feared, and the world bows before what it fears, not before what it admires. Machiavelli understood this difference. The wise man seeks to understand, the cold man seeks to control. The first desires harmony, the second, dominion. And on the board of power, harmony is only the pause between one victory and the next. The wise man speaks of virtues. The cold man understands utility. He does not lose himself in intentions. He measures results. He knows that, in the end, people do not follow the most just, but the most unshakable. Coldness is the seal of authority. While the wise man weighs the impact of emotions, the cold man uses them as tools. He does not protect himself from pain. He simply does not allow it to guide him. Wisdom observes chaos. Coldness walks through it. The wise man seeks meaning. The cold man seeks advantage. Machiavelli saw no cruelty in this, only clarity. Excessive compassion dissolves strength. The cold man understands that pity, when poorly managed, becomes weakness. The wise man hesitates out of empathy. The cold man decides out of necessity, and necessity always governs the fate of those who hesitate. Coldness is a form of emotional discipline. It is not the absence of feeling, but absolute control over it. The cold man feels everything but chooses what to express. He commands his own face, his own voice, his own time. Wisdom analyzes, coldness imposes. It is what turns a single glance into command. It is what silences a room without a word. Machiavelli observed that power is not born from knowledge, but from emotional predictability. The wise man may understand human nature, but the cold man manipulates it. The first explains behaviors, The second provokes them. The difference is practical. The wise man teaches prudence, the cold man teaches fear. And where there is fear, there is obedience. The mistake of the wise man is believing that reason generates respect. Respect is born from impact, and impact is born from the absence of reactivity. The cold man does not react. He responds with calculation. His calm is a form of violence. It disarms the impulsive and humiliates the emotional. Machiavelli saw in this kind of man the true prince, one whose serenity is more threatening than any speech. The wise man wants to be understood. The cold man wants to be obeyed. The difference is subtle, but decisive. The desire to be understood is a weakness. The desire to be obeyed is a plan. The wise man connects. The cold man ascends. Machiavelli understood that, in the human game, power is not conquered through depth, but through restraint. Coldness is the maturity of intelligence. It is the moment when thought stops seeking meaning and begins building structure. The cold man does not debate principles. He defines boundaries. He knows that the world is guided by perception, not truth, and that is why he speaks little, observes much, and acts only when the impact is inevitable. Machiavelli would leave the warning: to be wise is to be respected from afar. To be cold is to be obeyed in silence. The first awakens temporary admiration. The second creates permanent power. In the end, the world belongs not to those who understand chaos, but to those who can remain still within it. Silence is the language of those who rule without the need to announce it. Machiavelli understood that every man who speaks too much exposes himself. Words are a form of surrender. They reveal intentions, weaknesses, impulses. Silence, on the other hand, creates doubt, and doubt is power. The strategist does not fear being misunderstood. He only fears being easily read. Silence is the veil that protects inner dominion. The man who speaks to be understood exposes himself. The man who masters silence becomes an enigma. Modern society values expression, but power is built on restraint. The one who talks constantly seeks validation. The one who knows how to remain silent controls attention. Machiavelli observed that the true leader does not defend himself with words. He imposes himself through presence. Silence is the ground where authority takes root. The strategist uses silence as both shield and blade. As a shield, it protects him from provocations. The man who answers everything shows urgency to be accepted. Silence confuses, disarms, and lowers the adversary into the territory of doubt. As a blade, silence cuts without wounding. It humiliates the fool who needs to prove something. The simple act of not reacting is already a form of domination. To speak is to surrender territory. Every word uttered is a piece removed from the board of mystery. Machiavelli knew that mystery sustains respect. The predictable man loses his aura, and the man who over-explains destroys his own magnetism. Well-managed silence makes others fill the void with their own projections. And projection is a form of control, because people obey what they imagine, not what they see. Silence is also discipline. It demands restraint of the ego, mastery over anxiety, patience over impulse. The strategist does not speak to win. He speaks when he has already won. He understands that time is an ally, and that impact grows in the waiting. The fool must shout to be heard. The powerful speaks softly and still dominates the room. Silence turns sound into a controlled weapon. In moments of conflict, the man who remains silent controls the rhythm of tension. The one who shouts loses emotional command. The one who stays silent observes the other's loss of control. Machiavelli saw in this a form of psychological warfare. Silence forces the enemy to reveal what he meant to conceal. It creates discomfort, and discomfort exposes intention. Thus, the strategist wins before he needs to react. Silence also serves as a test. It reveals who needs noise to exist. True power can be felt in the air when a man goes quiet and the room changes. That is presence, the kind that intimidates without gesture, that imposes respect without threat. It is the invisible dominion Machiavelli called virtù, controlled strength that acts without being noticed. The man who learns to be silent does not become weak. He becomes unpredictable. Silence is the filter that separates those who possess control from those who merely perform it. Machiavelli would leave the warning: the sound of weakness is haste in responding. The sound of strength is the silence before movement. He who masters silence masters time, and he who masters time has already won before acting. Machiavelli understood that between the man who thinks and the man who governs, there is an abyss. The philosopher seeks to understand the laws of human nature, while the prince uses them. One lives through observation, the other through action. The first fears error, the second embraces it. The philosopher desires coherence, but the prince demands results. Throughout history, the wise wrote about power, yet it was the princes who actually exercised it. The philosopher hides within ideas, while the prince finds refuge in circumstances. Philosophical thought pursues logical purity, but power demands tactical impurity. The man who tries to unite both dissolves himself. He thinks too much to govern, and governs too much to think. Machiavelli understood that politics does not obey morality but necessity, and necessity does not wait for reflection. It demands an immediate response, even if imperfect. The philosopher believes the world can be shaped by reason. The prince understands the world can only be bent by force. The first tries to persuade, the second imposes. The distance between them is the space where history is decided. Machiavelli observed that kingdoms did not fall because of a lack of wisdom, but because of an excess of idealism. The man who imagines the world as it should be forgets to handle the world as it is. Philosophy seeks truth, while power seeks stability. When the philosopher debates principles, the prince measures loyalties. When the first attempts to define what is good, the second ensures survival. For Machiavelli, goodness was a luxury that only exists after victory. Before that, there is only calculation. The philosopher who ignores this reality is devoured by the very world he believes he can educate. The mistake of the thinker is believing that the clarity of his reasoning will protect him from the brutality of the world. The prince knows that brutality is not defeated by ideas, but by presence, deception, and command. The philosopher writes for the future. The prince acts in the present. One seeks eternity, the other continuity, and both pay their price. The philosopher pays with solitude, the prince with distrust. Machiavelli did not despise philosophy. He simply recognized that thought without power is impotence. Lucidity without structure turns into contemplation. The philosopher observes the game, but the game does not observe him. The prince, on the other hand, moves within it. He dirties his hands, lies when he must, and survives. The price of purity, in the real world, is irrelevance. The man who desires power must learn to think like a philosopher, but act like a prince. He must understand human behavior, but never become trapped by it. Thought must serve as orientation, not paralysis. The philosophical mind sees the map. The strategic mind walks through it. The great mistake is believing that seeing the path is the same as traveling it. Machiavelli made the distinction clear. Power belongs to those who have the courage to apply what they understand, not to those who merely understand. The philosopher wants to comprehend the throne. The prince wants to sit on it. And while the first seeks justice, the second seeks position. In the end, the world remembers those who ruled, not those who warned. To think is a privilege. To act is sovereignty. The man who sees too much loses the simplicity of instinct, and without instinct, he loses the rhythm of power. Machiavelli saw this with clarity. An excess of consciousness turns the mind into a minefield. The lucid man analyzes before acting, weighs before reacting, and while he reflects, the world has already moved. Awareness is useful only up to the point where it doesn't delay decision. Beyond that, it becomes a burden disguised as wisdom. The overly self-aware man believes that mastering his own thoughts is the same as mastering reality. But power does not lie in understanding. It lies in execution. Machiavelli observed that the man who overthinks himself becomes predictable because his self-consciousness makes him rigid. He acts with excessive caution, speaks with calculated weight, and radiates artificiality. The world, by instinct, does not respect what is artificial. Exaggerated consciousness also destroys the naturalness of presence. The man who constantly watches himself cannot flow. He controls himself like a prisoner inside his own body. This makes him socially weak, because his energy reveals effort. Machiavelli knew that social power is born from naturalness, and naturalness exists only when a man forgets he is being observed. The hyperconscious mind lives in constant tension, and tension is a sign of inferiority. Excessive awareness breeds paralysis. The man studies every gesture, every word, trying to predict how he will be perceived, and in this endless calculation, he loses command over the moment. True power demands strategic spontaneity, the ability to act calmly, yet without hesitation. Awareness must guide instinct, not replace it. When a man thinks before breathing, he has already lost control of his own image. Machiavelli saw that absolute awareness is the enemy of authority. A leader cannot doubt his own gesture. Even when he errs, he must appear convinced. Awareness makes him hesitate, and hesitation exposes weakness. Power, by nature, requires a certain practical unconsciousness, a degree of coldness that allows action without the weight of overthinking. The man who reflects on every step is inevitably overtaken by the one who simply walks. The overly conscious man believes that to see is enough. But seeing the game is not the same as playing it. Awareness reveals the error, but does not prevent it. It warns, but does not protect. Machiavelli would say that excessive lucidity is useless when there is no emotional control. The man who understands everything but does nothing becomes a spectator of his own impotence. Social weakness begins when thought replaces presence. The overly conscious man speaks little, reacts slowly, and radiates insecurity. He is neither feared nor hated. He is ignored, and being ignored is the opposite of power. Respect is born from impact, and impact is born from confidence in one's own gesture. Machiavelli would leave the warning: the man who thinks about every movement loses the instinct to move. Awareness must be a blade, not a chain. Balance lies in seeing the game without drowning in it, for the world is not ruled by the most conscious, but by those who know how to feign unconsciousness while controlling everything in silence. Machiavelli knew that power begins within the man himself. Before governing bodies, one must govern thoughts. Mastery of the mind is the first throne, and he who loses it loses all others. The common man believes that thinking is freedom, yet he is a slave to his own undisciplined mind. True freedom is not to think whatever one wants, but to think only what is necessary. An ungoverned mind is an internal enemy. It moves by impulse, seeks distraction, craves approval. Every uncontrolled thought is a breach through which the world enters. Machiavelli understood that the true strategist observes his mind as he observes his enemy, with distance and coldness. He does not believe in his emotions. He manages them. Self-mastery begins the moment a man stops believing everything he feels. The command of the mind is the art of imposing silence within one's own chaos. The weak man reacts to his thoughts as one who fights against waves. The strong man lets them pass. The mind can be trained, and power is born from this invisible domestication. The prince who controls his reasoning is not dominated by doubt or desire. He acts with clarity because his thoughts have already been trained to obey. Machiavelli saw self-control as a political act. He who governs his interior becomes impenetrable. No insult diverts him, no emotion sabotages him. He moves as if nothing affects him, and that is precisely what makes him dangerous. The man who does not react confuses others, and the confused lose the game. Inner silence is the foundation of unpredictability. The problem of the modern man is that he thinks to justify himself, not to decide. His mind drags him from memory to memory, from fear to fear, until exhaustion replaces will. Machiavelli would say that such a man is ruled by his own conscience, a subtle but total tyranny. The strategist, on the other hand, makes conscience his servant. He thinks as one who gives orders, short, direct, and lethal. To control the mind is to eliminate excess. It is to keep only what serves movement. The disciplined man does not think about everything. He thinks about what matters. He treats emotions as instruments and thoughts as soldiers. No army wins if it does not know how to obey. Mental chaos is the first form of defeat, the battlefield where the enemy doesn't even need to fight. Machiavelli observed that serenity is the most efficient disguise of power. The man who thinks with coldness needs to prove nothing. His presence conveys stability, and stability is magnetism. Others approach not because he asks, but because his mind commands silence around him. Mental dominance generates social gravity, and gravity is the invisible name of authority. The command of the mind over the mind is the highest point of self-mastery. It is not about erasing emotions but subduing them. Anger, fear, desire, all must obey the central will. Machiavelli would leave this warning: the man who does not rule his own mind will be ruled by those who think less but act more. And the world, implacable as ever, always grants power to the one who can think calmly within the storm. Machiavelli left a warning that few had the courage to hear. The man who thinks too much serves. Because while he builds arguments, someone with less lucidity but more decision already commands him. Thought, when not accompanied by action, becomes obedience in disguise. The world is ruled by men who make mistakes quickly, not by those who wait for the perfect moment. The thinker believes control lies in understanding, but real control lies in movement. Machiavelli saw intellectuals trapped in debates about what is just, while princes acted and rewrote the definition of justice itself. Excessive reasoning is the prison of the proud. He would rather be right than be in command. And power does not reward those who are right. It rewards those who act with precision. He who thinks too much tries to predict everything, and in trying to predict, he becomes a prisoner of variables. The strategist, on the other hand, moves based on probability, not certainty. He understands that every victory requires exposure. The thinker fears failure, and for that reason, remains still. Machiavelli knew that the motionless man is useful only to serve, because power demands constant movement, and the fear of action is the most elegant form of submission. The man who thinks too much does not realize that by analyzing power, he has already surrendered it. He studies the behavior of the strong, admires their audacity, but never imitates them. He lives believing that one day he will be ready, when in truth, he is already late. Machiavelli saw excessive lucidity as a form of voluntary servitude. The man who knows what he should do but does not do it has already accepted the hierarchy of those who act. Thinking is important only until the moment it serves decision. After that, it becomes noise. The strategist thinks just enough to understand the game and then enters it. The thinker, on the other hand, keeps watching. He wants to win without getting dirty, to ascend without confrontation. But power is a battlefield, not an academic debate. Machiavelli understood that every form of dominance is born from risk, and that whoever avoids risk inevitably serves the one who embraces it. Excessive thought also destroys presence. The man who calculates too much loses the steady gaze, the direct voice, the simple gesture. Everything in him exposes insecurity, and the world senses it. Machiavelli knew that power is a theater of perception. He who hesitates is seen as inferior. He who advances is seen as necessary. The thinker, fearing error, disappears. The dominant one, even when erring, remains. The warning is ancient, but ignored. Overthinking is the first stage of servitude. The man who does not act becomes useful only to justify the victory of those who do. Machiavelli did not despise thought, only its excess. The mind must be sharp, not heavy. In the end, the game is simple. Either thought serves action, or the man serves another who acts. Machiavelli would have left his words carved as a sentence. He who thinks too much serves. Because in the realm of indecision, even wisdom kneels. And the silence of the one who acts is worth more than 1,000 theories from those who never left their own minds.